Chapter 46. "Say, Joe," was his greeting to his old-time working mate next morning. "There's a Frenchman out on 28th Street. He's made a pot of money, and he's going back to France. It's a dandy, well-appointed small steam laundry. There's a start for you if you want to settle down. Here, take this. Buy some clothes with it, and be at the man's office by 10 o'clock. He looked up the laundry for me, and he'll take you out and show you around. If you like it and think it is worth the price, 12,000, let me know, and it is yours. Now run along. I'm busy. I'll see you later." "Now, look here, Mart," the other said slowly, with kindling anger. "I come here this morning to see you, savvy? I didn't come here to get no laundry. I come here for a talk for old friend's sake, and you shove a laundry at me. I tell you what you can do. You can take that laundry and go to hell." He was out of the room when Martin caught him and whirled him around. "Now you look here, Joe," he said. "If you act that way, I'll punch your head. And for old friend's sake, I'll punch it hard. Savvy?" "You will you?" Joe had clinched and attempted to throw him, and he was twisting and writhing out of the advantage of the other's hold. They reeled about the room, locked in each other's arms, and came down with a crash across the splintered wreckage of a wicker chair. Joe was underneath, with arms spread out and held, and with Martin's knee on his chest. He was panting and gasping for breath when Martin released him. "Now we'll talk a moment," Martin said. "You can't get fresh with me. I want that laundry business finished first of all. Then you can come back and we'll talk for old sake's sake. I told you I was busy. Look at that." A servant had just come in with the morning mail, a great mass of letters and magazines. "How can I wade through all that and talk with you? You go and fix up that laundry, and then we'll get together." "All right," Joe admitted reluctantly. "I thought you was turning me down, but I guess I was mistaken. But you can't lick me, Mart, in a stand-up fight. I've got the reach on you." "We'll put on some gloves sometime and see," Martin said with a smile. "Sure, as soon as I get that laundry going." Joe extended his arm. "You see that reach? It'll make you go a few." Martin heaved a sigh of relief when the door closed behind the laundryman. He was becoming antisocial. Daily he found it a severer strain to be decent with people. Their presence perturbed him, and the effort of conversation irritated him. They made him restless, and no sooner was he in contact with them than he was casting about for excuses to get rid of them. He did not proceed to attack his mail, and for a half-hour he lolled in his chair, doing nothing, while no more than vague, half-formed thoughts occasionally filtered through his intelligence, or rather, at wide intervals, themselves constituted the flickering of his intelligence. He roused himself and began glancing through his mail. There were dozens of requests for autographs. He knew them at sight. There were professional begging letters, and there were letters from cranks, ranging from the man with a working model of perpetual motion, and the man who demonstrated that the surface of the earth was the inside of a hollow sphere, to the man seeking financial aid to purchase the peninsula of Lower California for the purpose of communist colonization. There were letters from women seeking to know him, and over one such he smiled, for enclosed was her receipt for pew rent, sent as evidence of her good faith and as proof of her respectability. Editors and publishers contributed to the daily heap of letters, the former on their knees for his manuscripts, the latter on their knees for his books. His poor disdained manuscripts, that had kept all he possessed in pawn for so many dreary months, in order to find them in postage. There were unexpected checks for English serial rights, and for advance payments on foreign translations. His English agent announced the sale of German translation rights in 3 of his books, and informed him that Swedish editions, from which he could expect nothing because Sweden was not party to the Berne Convention, were already on the market. Then there was a nominal request for his permission for a Russian translation, that country being likewise outside the Berne Convention. He turned to the huge bundle of clippings which had come in from the press bureau, and read about himself and his vogue, which had become a furor. All his creative output had been flung to the public in one magnificent sweep. That seemed to account for it. He had taken the public off its feet, the way Kipling had, that time when he lay near to death and all the mob, animated by a mob-mind thought, began suddenly to read him. Martin remembered how that same world mob, having read him and acclaimed him and not understood him in the least, had abruptly, a few months later, flung itself upon him and torn him to pieces. Martin grinned at the thought. Who was he that he should not be similarly treated in a few more months? Well, he would fool the mob. He would be away in the South Seas, building his grass house, trading for pearls and copra, jumping reefs in frail outriggers, catching sharks and bonitas, hunting wild goats among the cliffs of the valley that lay next to the valley of Tahoe. In the moment of that thought, the desperateness of his situation dawned upon him. He saw, clear-eyed, that he was in the valley of the shadow. All the life that was in him was fading, fainting, making toward death. He realized how much he slept, and how much he desired to sleep. Of old he hated sleep. It had robbed him of precious moments of living. 4 hours of sleep in the 24 had meant being robbed of 4 hours of life. How he had grudged sleep. Now it was life he grudged. Life was not good. Its taste in his mouth was without tang and bitter. This was his peril. Life that did not yearn toward life was in fair way toward ceasing. Some remote instinct for preservation stirred in him, and he knew that he must get away. He glanced about the room, and the thought of packing was burdensome. Perhaps it would be better to leave that to the last. In the meantime, he might be getting an outfit. He put on his hat and went out, stopping at a gun store, where he spent the remainder of the morning buying automatic rifles, ammunition, and fishing tackle. Fashions changed in trading, and he knew he would have to wait till he reached Tahiti before ordering his trade goods. They could come up from Australia anyway. This solution was a source of pleasure. He had avoided doing something, and the doing of anything just now was unpleasant. He went back to the hotel gladly, with a feeling of satisfaction in that the comfortable Morris chair was waiting for him, and he groaned inwardly on entering his room at the sight of Joe in the Morris chair. Joe was delighted with the laundry. Everything was settled, and he would enter into possession next day. Martin lay on the bed, with closed eyes, while the other talked on. Martin's thoughts were far away, so far away that he was rarely aware that he was thinking. It was only by an effort that he occasionally responded. And yet this was Joe, whom he had always liked. But Joe was too keen with life. The boisterous impact of it on Martin's jaded mind was a hurt. It was an aching probe to his tired sensitiveness. When Joe reminded him that sometime in the future they were going to put on the gloves together, he could almost have screamed. "Remember, Joe, you're to run the laundry according to those old rules you used to lay down at Shelley Hot Springs," he said. "No overworking, no working at night, and no children at the Mangles, no children anywhere, and a fair wage." Joe nodded and pulled out a notebook. "Look at here. I was working out them rules before breakfast this a.m. What do you think of 'em?" He read them aloud, and Martin approved, worrying at the same time as to when Joe would take himself off. It was late afternoon when he awoke. Slowly, the fact of life came back to him. He glanced about the room. Joe had evidently stolen away after he had dozed off. That was considerate of Joe, he thought. Then he closed his eyes and slept again. In the days that followed, Joe was too busy organizing and taking hold of the laundry to bother him much, and it was not until the day before sailing that the newspapers made the announcement that he had taken passage on the Mariposa. Once, when the instinct of preservation fluttered, he went to a doctor and underwent a searching physical examination. Nothing could be found the matter with him. His heart and lungs were pronounced magnificent. Every organ, so far as the doctor could know, was normal and was working normally. "There is nothing the matter with you, Mr. Eden," he said. "Positively nothing the matter with you. You are in the pink of condition. Candidly, I envy you your health. It is superb. Look at that chest. There, And in your stomach lies the secret of your remarkable constitution. Physically, you are a man in 1,000, in 10,000. Barring accidents, you should live to be 100. And Martin knew that Lizzie's diagnosis had been correct. Physically, he was all right. It was his think machine that had gone wrong, and there was no cure for that except to get away to the South Seas. The trouble was that now, on the verge of departure, he had no desire to go. The South Seas charmed him no more than did bourgeois civilization. There was no zest in the thought of departure, while the act of departure appalled him as a weariness of the flesh. He would have felt better if he were already on board and gone. The last day was a sore trial. Having read of his sailing in the morning papers, Bernard Higginbotham, Gertrude, and all the family came to say good-bye, as did Hermann von Schmidt and Marion. Then there was business to be transacted, bills to be paid, and everlasting reporters to be endured. He said good-bye to Lizzie Connolly, abruptly, at the entrance to night school, and hurried away. At the hotel he found Joe, too busy all day with the laundry to have come to him earlier. It was the last straw, but Martin gripped the arms of his chair and talked and listened for half an hour. "You know, Joe," he said, "that you are not to be tied down to that laundry. There are no strings on it. You can sell it any time and blow the money. Any time you get sick of it and want to hit the road, just pull out. Do what will make you the happiest." Joe shook his head. "No more road in mine, thank you kindly. Hoboin's all right, exceptin' for one thing, the girls. I can't help it, but I'm a ladies' man. I can't get along without 'em. And you've got to get along without 'em when you're hoboing. The times I've passed by houses where dances and parties was going on, and heard the women laugh and saw their white dresses and smilin' faces through the windows, gee! I tell you them moments was plain hell. I like dancin' and picnics, and walkin' in the moonlight, and all the rest too well. Me for the laundry, and a good front, with big iron dollars clinkin' in my jeans. I seen a girl already just yesterday, and do you know, I'm feelin' already I'd just as soon marry her as not. I've been whistlin' all day at the thought of it. She's a beaut, with the kindest eyes and softest voice you ever heard. Me for her, you can stack on that. Say, why don't you get married with all this money to burn? You could get the finest girl in the land." Martin shook his head with a smile, but in his secret heart he was wondering why any man wanted to marry. It seemed an amazing and incomprehensible thing. From the deck of the Mariposa, at the sailing hour, he saw Lizzie Connolly hiding on the skirts of the crowd on the wharf. "Take her with you," came the thought. It is easy to be kind. She will be supremely happy. It was almost a temptation one moment, and the succeeding moment it became a terror. He was in a panic at the thought of it. His tired soul cried out in protest. He turned away from the rail with a groan, muttering, "Man, you are too sick. You are too sick." He fled to his stateroom, where he lurked until the steamer was clear of the dock. In the dining room, at luncheon, he found himself in the place of honor at the captain's right, and he was not long in discovering that he was the great man on board. But no more unsatisfactory great man ever sailed on a ship. He spent the afternoon in a deck chair, with closed eyes, dozing brokenly most of the time, and in the evening went early to bed. After the second day, recovered from seasickness, the full passenger list was in evidence, and the more he saw of the passengers, the more he disliked them. Yet he knew that he did them injustice. They were good and kindly people, he forced himself to acknowledge, and in the moment of acknowledgment he qualified, good and kindly, like all the bourgeoisie, with all the psychological cramp and intellectual futility of their kind. They bored him when they talked with him. Their little superficial minds were so filled with emptiness, while the boisterous high spirits and the excessive energy of the younger people shocked him. They were never quiet, ceaselessly playing deck quoits, tossing rings, promenading, or rushing to the rail with loud cries to watch the leaping porpoises and the first schools of flying fish. He slept much. After breakfast he sought his deck chair with a magazine he never finished. The printed pages tired him. He puzzled that men found so much to write about, and, puzzling, dozed in his chair. When the gong awoke him for luncheon, he was irritated that he must awaken. There was no satisfaction in being awake. Once he tried to rouse himself from his lethargy, and went forward into the forecastle with the sailors. But the breed of sailor seemed to have changed since the days he had lived in the forecastle. He could find no kinship with these stolid-faced, ox-minded, bestial creatures. He was in despair. Up above, nobody had wanted Martin Eden for his own sake, and he could not go back to those of his own class who had wanted him in the past. He did not want them. He could not stand them any more than he could stand the stupid first-class passengers and the riotous young people. Life was to him like strong white light that hurts the tired eyes of a sick person. During every conscious moment, life blazed in a raw glare around him and upon him. It hurt. It hurt intolerably. It was the first time in his life that Martin had traveled first class. On ships at sea, he had always been in the forecastle, the steerage, or in the black depths of the coal-hold, passing coal. In those days, climbing up the iron ladders, from out of the pit of stifling heat, he had often caught glimpses of the passengers, in cool white, doing nothing but enjoy themselves, under awnings spread to keep the sun and wind away from them, with subservient stewards taking care of their every want and whim, and it had seemed to him that the realm in which they moved and had their being was nothing else but paradise. Well, here he was, the great man on board, in the midmost center of it, sitting at the captain's right hand, and yet vainly harking back to the forecastle and stokehole, in quest of the paradise he had lost. He had found no new one, and now he could not find the old one. He strove to stir himself and find something to interest him. He ventured the petty officer's mess, and was glad to get away. He talked with the quartermaster off duty, an intelligent man who promptly prodded him with the socialist propaganda, and forced into his hands a bunch of leaflets and pamphlets. He listened to the man expounding the slave morality, and, as he listened, he thought languidly of his own Nietzsche philosophy. But what was it worth, after all? He remembered one of Nietzsche's mad utterances, wherein that madman had doubted truth. And who was to say? Perhaps Nietzsche had been right. Perhaps there was no truth in anything, no truth in truth, no such thing as truth. But his mind wearied quickly, and he was content to go back to his chair and doze. Miserable as he was on the steamer, a new misery came upon him. What, when the steamer reached Tahiti? He would have to go ashore. He would have to order his trade goods, to find a passage on a schooner to the Marquesas, to do 1,001 things that were awful to contemplate. Whenever he steeled himself deliberately to think, he could see the desperate peril in which he stood. In all truth, he was in the valley of the shadow, and his danger lay in that he was not afraid. If he were only afraid, he would make toward life. Being unafraid, he was drifting deeper into the shadow. He found no delight in the old familiar things of life. The Mariposa was now in the northeast trades, and this whine of wind, surging against him, irritated him. He had his chair moved to escape the embrace of this lusty comrade of old days and nights. The day the Mariposa entered the doldrums, Martin was more miserable than ever. He could no longer sleep. He was soaked with sleep, and perforce he must now stay awake and endure the white glare of life. He moved about restlessly. The air was sticky and humid, and the rain squalls were unrefreshing. He ached with life. He walked around the deck until that hurt too much, then sat in his chair until he was compelled to walk again. He forced himself at last to finish the magazine, and from the steamer library he culled several volumes of poetry. But they could not hold him, and once more he took to walking. He stayed late on deck after dinner, and that did not help him, for when he went below he could not sleep. This surcease from life had failed him. It was too much. He turned on the electric light and tried to read. One of the volumes was a Swinburne. He lay in bed, glancing through its pages, until suddenly he became aware that he was reading with interest. He finished the stanza, attempted to read on, then came back to it. He rested the book face downward on his breast and fell to thinking. That was it, the very thing. Strange that it had never come to him before. That was the meaning of it all. He had been drifting that way all the time, and now Swinburne showed him that it was the happy way out. He wanted rest, and here was rest awaiting him. He glanced at the open porthole. Yes, it was large enough. For the first time in weeks he felt happy. At last he had discovered the cure of his ill. He picked up the book and read the stanza slowly aloud. From too much love of living, from hope and fear set free, we thank with brief thanksgiving, whatever gods may be, that no life lives forever, that dead men rise up never, that even the weariest river winds somewhere safe to sea. He looked again at the open port. Swinburne had furnished the key. Life was ill, or rather, it had become ill, an unbearable thing. That dead men rise up never. That line stirred him with a profound feeling of gratitude. It was the one beneficent thing in the universe. When life became an aching weariness, death was ready to soothe away to everlasting sleep. But what was he waiting for? It was time to go. He arose and thrust his head out the porthole, looking down into the milky wash. The Mariposa was deeply loaded, and, hanging by his hands, his feet would be in the water. He could slip in noiselessly, no one would hear. A smother of spray dashed up, wetting his face. It tasted salt on his lips, and the taste was good. He wondered if he ought to write a swan song, but laughed the thought away. There was no time. He was too impatient to be gone. Turning off the light in his room so that it might not betray him, he went out the porthole feet first. His shoulders stuck, and he forced himself back so as to try with one arm down by his side. A roll of the steamer aided him, and he was through, hanging by his hands. When his feet touched the sea, he let go. He was in a milky froth of water. The side of the Mariposa rushed past him like a dark wall, broken here and there by lighted ports. She was certainly making time. Almost before he knew it, he was astern, swimming gently on the foam-crackling surface. A bonita stuck at his white body, and he laughed aloud. It had taken a piece out, and the sting of it reminded him of why he was there. In the work to do, he had forgotten the purpose of it. The lights of the Mariposa were growing dim in the distance, and there he was, swimming confidently, as though it were his intention to make for the nearest land 1,000 miles or so away. It was the automatic instinct to live. He ceased swimming, but the moment he felt the water rising above his mouth, the hand stuck out sharply with a lifting movement. The will to live was his thought, and the thought was accompanied by a sneer. Well, he had will, aye, will strong enough that with one last exertion it could destroy itself and cease to be. He changed his position to a vertical one. He glanced up at the quiet stars, at the same time emptying his lungs of air. With swift, vigorous propulsion of hands and feet, he lifted his shoulders and half his chest out of water. This was to gain impetus for the descent. Then he let himself go, and sank without movement, a white statue, into the sea. He breathed in the water deeply, deliberately, after the manner of a man taking an anesthetic. When he strangled, quite involuntarily, his arms and legs clawed the water and drove him up to the surface and into the clear sight of the stars. The will to live, he thought disdainfully, vainly endeavoring not to breathe the air into his bursting lungs. Well, he would have to try a new way. He filled his lungs with air, filled them full. This supply would take him far down. He turned over and went down head first, swimming with all his strength and all his will. Deeper and deeper he went. His eyes were open, and he watched the ghostly, phosphorescent trails of the darting bonita. As he swam, he hoped that they would not strike at him, for it might snap the tension of his will. But they did not strike, and he found time to be grateful for this last kindness of life. Down, down he swam, till his arms and legs grew tired and hardly moved. He knew that he was deep. The pressure on his eardrums was a pain, and there was a buzzing in his head. His endurance was faltering, but he compelled his arms and legs to drive him deeper until his will snapped and the air drove from his lungs in a great explosive rush. The bubbles rubbed and bounded, like tiny balloons, against his cheeks and eyes as they took their upward flight. Then came pain and strangulation. This hurt was not death, was the thought that oscillated between his reeling consciousness. Death did not hurt. It was life, the pangs of life, this awful, suffocating feeling. It was the last blow life could deal him. His willful hands and feet began to beat and churn about, spasmodically and feebly. But he had fooled them, and the will to live that made them beat and churn. He was too deep down. They could never bring him to the surface. He seemed floating languidly in a sea of dreamy vision. Colors and radiances surrounded him and bathed him and pervaded him. What was that? It seemed a lighthouse, but it was inside his brain, a flashing, bright white light. It flashed swifter and swifter. There was a long rumble of sound, and it seemed to him that he was falling down a vast and interminable stairway, and somewhere at the bottom he fell into darkness. That much he knew. He had fallen into darkness, and at the instant he knew, he ceased to know. The end.